The surge comes at dawn. Not fire, exactly, though fire is part of it. Not wind, though it moves faster than any storm. A pyroclastic surge is a wall of superheated gas and pulverized rock, a river of death flowing downhill at 50 miles per hour. Temperature 400 degrees Celsius. Too hot for lungs to process, too fast for legs to outrun. It rolls across the 3 meters of pumice stone that already bury Pompeii's streets, sweeping over walls that stood for centuries, through doorways where families huddled thinking walls might save them. The woman dies trying to shield her child. You can see this in the plaster cast made 18 centuries later, the way her body curves over the smaller form, arms wrapped protectively, face pressed down. She dies mid-breath. The child dies in the same instant. The ash that kills them also preserves them, hardening around their bodies as they decompose, holding the shape of their final pose until archaeologists pour liquid plaster into the void and resurrect them as monuments to a morning when the world ended. In the Garden of the Fugitives, 13 people will be found together, their bodies scattered across what was once an orchard. At the Stabian Baths, 2 victims huddle in positions, suggesting they sought shelter in a familiar place, perhaps hoping the thick walls would protect them. In a brothel near the Forum, chained workers have no choice about staying or fleeing. Their remains will be discovered, still shackled to beds of stone. A dog, tethered in a courtyard, twists against its collar as the surge approaches, and the plaster cast captures its agony in 3 dimensions. These are the last citizens of Pompeii, and they die in seconds, across a city already buried under volcanic debris on an October morning in the year 79. Welcome to Whispered Empires, where we uncover the human moments that shaped our world forever. How does a thriving city vanish in a single day? How do 20,000 people living ordinary lives, buying bread, visiting baths, arguing in the Forum, making love in cramped rooms, tending vines on hillsides, how do they become ghosts preserved in ash? To understand what happens at Pompeii on October 24, 79 AD, and recent archaeological evidence, including a charcoal graffito dated October 17, suggests autumn rather than the traditional August date. We must understand not the disaster itself, which is simple and brutal, but the city that existed before the mountain spoke. We must walk its streets in sunlight, smell garlic frying in olive oil, hear the auctioneer's voice in the Forum, feel the weight of water jars carried from public fountains. We must know Pompeii alive before we can grasp what it means that Pompeii died. The city sits 6 miles southeast of Mount Vesuvius, on a slight elevation above the Sarno River, its walls enclosing about 165 acres of urban life. 20,000 people call it home. Maybe more census figures from the ancient world are unreliable, and modern estimates range from 10 to 25,000 depending on how you count slaves. How you estimate density in the insulae, the apartment blocks where the poor live, stacked like cordwood. But the number doesn't matter as much as the texture of the place. Walk Pompeii's streets on an October morning before the mountain speaks. The bakeries wake first, slaves stoking fires in the ovens before dawn, the smell of burning wood mixing with yeast and flour. 34 bakeries serve the city, each with its massive millstones, 2 volcanic stones, the upper rotating against the lower, turned by donkeys walking in circles, hour after hour, grinding wheat into flour. The donkeys wear blinders. They walk the same path all day, every day, until they are too old to work, and then they are butchered. The slaves who tend the ovens have it worse. They work in rooms where summer temperatures reach 120 degrees, where winter provides no respite because the ovens never cool. Their burns heal poorly. Their lungs fill with flour dust. But bread must be made, And bread is made, 80 loaves at a time, round and scored into 8 sections, so they can be torn apart and sold individually. By mid-morning, the Forum is alive. This is the heart of the city, a rectangular open space 200 feet long, surrounded by porticos and temples. Here the merchants set up stalls, pottery from Greece, glassware from Syria, spices from Egypt, amber from the north. Here the politicians give speeches from the raised platform, promising grain distributions and improved aqueducts and better games in the amphitheatre. Here the wealthy stroll, attended by slaves carrying parasols against the sun. Here the beggars work, positioning themselves near the temple of Jupiter, where the pious are most likely to feel generous. Here deals are struck, gossip exchanged, marriages arranged, lawsuits threatened. The noise is constant vendors shouting prices, children running between columns, cartwheels rattling on stone, 1,000 conversations overlapping in Latin and Greek and Oscan. The native language not quite dead despite 2 centuries of Romanization. Pompeii is not Rome. It is a provincial city, wealthy by provincial standards, with an economy built on wine, olive oil, and garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans use as a condiment on everything. The garum makers work on the city's outskirts, where the smell won't offend the wealthy. They take fish, anchovies, mackerel, whatever the Mediterranean yields, and layer them with salt in huge ceramic vats. Then they wait. Months pass. The fish ferment, liquefying into a pungent amber liquid that Romans put on bread, vegetables, meat, everything. The best garum costs more than wine. The worst garum costs less than the vats that hold it. Pompeii produces both. The volcanic soil is absurdly fertile. Grapes grow fat on the slopes of Vesuvius, which nobody realizes is a volcano. They think it's just a mountain, vine-covered and benign, a scenic backdrop to a prosperous life. The wine produced here is not the finest in Italy. That honor goes to the Falernian region to the north, but it is abundant and cheap, exported in amphorae, stamped with Pompeian makers' marks, shipped to Rome and beyond. The city is old. The Etruscans settled here in the 7th century BC, then Greeks, then Samnites, and finally, after the social war of 91 to 88 BC, Romans. Each culture left its mark, the street grid, the fortifications, the mix of languages scratched into plaster as graffiti. By 79 AD, Pompeii is thoroughly Roman, a colony under the patronage of Venus. There are temples to Jupiter, Apollo, Venus, Isis. There is a forum where politicians speak and merchants bargain. There is an amphitheatre that holds 20,000 spectators for gladiatorial combat. There are public baths, the Stabian baths, the Forum baths, the Central baths, still under construction, with heated pools and ingenious hypercaust systems that circulate hot air under marble floors. There are theatres for drama and mime. There is at least one large brothel, the Lupanar, with stone beds and explicit frescoes showing clients what's available, along with perhaps 25 other smaller establishments where sex can be purchased. There are bakeries, taverns, workshops for fullers who clean cloth by stomping it in vats of urine, shops selling everything from lamps to love potions. The streets are narrow, barely wide enough for a cart, paved with basalt blocks worn smooth by feet and wheels. Stepping stones cross at intervals, allowing pedestrians to avoid the filth that flows in gutters, horse manure, kitchen waste, the contents of chamber pots. Phalluses carved into street corners point the way to brothels. Graffiti covers walls, election slogans, obscene jokes, love poems, price lists, insults, the names of gladiators and prostitutes. This is not the marble city of tourist reconstructions. Pompeii is loud, cramped, smelly, alive. It is a place where people live on top of each other, where the wealthy build villas with gardens and fountains, while slaves sleep in windowless cells, where children play in alleys and dogs bark and hawkers shout their wares. The streets are narrow, designed for foot traffic and handcarts, not the wheeled vehicles that thunder through Rome's boulevards. Most streets are barely 10 feet wide. Two people carrying water jars must turn sideways to pass each other. When a cart needs through, pedestrians press against walls. The streets themselves tell stories. They are paved with basalt blocks, dark volcanic stone brought from quarries to the north, laid centuries ago and worn smooth by countless feet. Between the blocks run gutters, where waste flows, kitchen scraps thrown from upper windows, the contents of chamber pots emptied at dawn, urine collected from public urinals by fullers who use it to clean wool, blood from butcher shops, olive oil from broken amphorae. Rain washes some of it away. The rest accumulates, especially in summer, when the aqueduct water pressure drops and the street fountains slow to a trickle. The smell in August is memorable. Visitors from Rome wrinkle their noses. Locals don't notice anymore. Stepping stones cross at intervals, raised blocks that allow pedestrians to avoid the filth while letting cartwheels pass on either side. This is genius in its simplicity. You can cross a Pompeian street without soiling your sandals, without lifting your toga above your knees. Children use the stones as perches, sitting and watching the world pass. Old men use them as meeting spots, exchanging news and complaints about the weather, the government, the price of grain. At night, when curfew empties the streets, or should, though enforcement is lax, beggars sleep on the stepping stones, curled against the raised surfaces, trying to stay dry when autumn rains begin. The city is a palimpsest of cultures, each wave of conquerors and settlers leaving marks. The Etruscans came first, 7 centuries ago, attracted by the fertile soil and the protected harbour at the Sarno's mouth. They laid out the basic street grid, built the first walls, established trade routes. Then came the Greeks, establishing colonies across southern Italy, bringing their language, their gods, their architectural styles. You can see it in the oldest temples, in the Doric columns at the Temple of Apollo, in the Greek inscriptions still visible on some buildings, despite centuries of weathering. The Samnites conquered the Greeks, held the city for 3 centuries, rebuilt the walls, expanded the forum. They spoke Oscan, an Italic language related to Latin but distinct, and some older Pompeians in 79 AD still speak it at home, though their children prefer Latin, the language of power and prestige. Rome came last, after the social war bloodied Italy's cities as Italian allies demanded Roman citizenship. Pompey backed the wrong side, supported the Italian cause against Rome. The city held out for months against Roman siege. When it finally fell in 89 BC, Rome was not gentle. The city became a Roman colony, its land redistributed to Roman military veterans, its government restructured, its language policy changed. Latin became mandatory in official proceedings. Roman law replaced Samnite traditions. Roman gods absorbed local deities. By 79 AD, 3 generations after the conquest, Pompeii is thoroughly Roman. Most citizens have never known anything else. But in the foundations of old buildings, in street names, in the prayers whispered at household shrines, the earlier layers persist. It is a city that has been rebuilding for 17 years, ever since the earthquake of 62 AD shattered columns and collapsed roofs across Campania. That earthquake, on February 5, was powerful enough that Emperor Nero, performing in Naples at the time, had to flee the theatre mid-performance. Suetonius, the imperial biographer, records that Nero insisted on finishing his song before leaving, typical Nero, concerned about appearances even as walls cracked around him. Pompeii suffered far worse damage than Naples. The Forum's colonnades collapsed. The Temple of Jupiter lost its roof and most of its columns. The amphitheater's upper tiers fractured. Water pipes broke throughout the city, leaving neighborhoods without running water for months. Private homes fared no better. In the wealthy villas, frescoes cracked, mosaics shattered. Garden walls fell. In the poor districts, entire insulae pancaked, killing families in their sleep. We don't know the death toll. Ancient sources don't bother counting the poor. 17 years is a long time to repair a city. But Pompeii is not wealthy enough to rebuild everything at once. Priorities must be set. The aqueduct is repaired first, can't live without water. The baths are restored. Next Romans will riot if you take away their baths. The amphitheater is patched. Though not perfectly, can't deprive the masses of gladiatorial games. The Forum gradually gets new columns, though as of 79 AD, the Temple of Jupiter remains a shell, its interior filled with construction materials, its restoration seemingly abandoned. Perhaps funds ran out. Perhaps the priestly college couldn't agree on the design. Perhaps, in the human way of setting difficult projects aside, everyone keeps meaning to get back to it, but never quite does. Private homes show similar patterns. The wealthy repaired quickly, hired contractors, imported craftsmen, installed frescoes even finer than before. The middle class repaired slowly, doing what they could afford each year, living in partially damaged houses in the meantime. The poor mostly didn't repair at all. They shored up walls with timber, covered holes with cloth, and hoped the structure would hold. It mostly did. But some buildings in 79 AD still bear visible earthquake damage, cracked walls, makeshift patches, rooms left unused because the ceiling is unsafe. The city has adapted around these wounds the way a body adapts around an injury that never quite heals. And through it all, life continues. Markets operate, baths reopen. The amphitheater hosts games, though not the kind they used to. Not since the riot of 59 AD, when Pompeian and Nucerian spectators fought in the stands, spilling violence into the streets, killing enough people that Emperor Nero banned Pompeii from hosting games for 10 years. That ban expired in 69 AD. Games resumed. The rivalry with Nuceria did not fade, but at least now it stays verbal. Nobody connects the earthquake to Vesuvius. Why would they? Earthquakes are common in Campania. They are part of the landscape, like hot springs and sulfur vents, curiosities, not warnings. The ground trembles. People shrug and rebuild. This is normal. This has always been normal. In the days before the final eruption, the tremors increase. Small earthquakes rattle dishes, crack plaster, wake people at night. No ancient source quantifies them, but modern volcanology suggests a swarm of seismic activity would have preceded an eruption of this magnitude. Perhaps Pompeians notice, perhaps they comment on it. But earthquakes have been happening for years. There is no framework for understanding that this time is different, that beneath Vesuvius, magma is forcing its way up through rock, that pressure is building toward catastrophic release. On October 17, someone writes a graffito in charcoal on a wall, a casual scrawl, probably a worker renovating a house. Charcoal is impermanent, easily smudged. It wouldn't last weeks. This suggests the eruption comes soon after, days, perhaps. We don't know what October 23 feels like in Pompeii. We can imagine a warm autumn day, harvest season, the markets full of pomegranates and walnuts, bread baking, children in school, slaves hauling water, politicians canvassing for elections scheduled for March. The prostitutes in the lupanar serving clients between the stone beds in windowless cells. the gladiators training at their barracks, the smell of olive oil and fish sauce and human sweat, the sounds of hammers on stone, of cartwheels on basalt, of an auctioneer's chant. Evening comes, lamps are lit. Dinner is eaten beans, bread, wine, perhaps some figs. Families settle. Slaves are locked in their quarters. The city sleeps. Morning arrives. October 24. The exact hour is debated. Pliny the Younger, writing from Misenum, some 18 miles across the Bay of Naples, says his mother pointed out the cloud about the 7th hour, around 1 p.m. by Roman reckoning. Though some scholars argue for earlier, archaeological evidence suggests the eruption began around midday or early afternoon. Perhaps there are warning signs, stronger tremors, animals acting strangely, a sulphurous smell, perhaps not. Vesuvius has been quiet since before living memory. The mountain is covered in vines and farms. It offers no clue it is about to produce one of history's deadliest eruptions. Then, with shocking speed, the summit explodes. Not a gradual build, not a slow increase. An explosion, sudden and violent, as pressurized magma breaks through the cap of old rock that has sealed the vent for 1700 years. The sound is beyond comprehension, louder than any thunder, a roar that travels across the bay to Misenum, that rattles windows in Naples, that sends flocks of birds into panicked flight. The mountain's peak disintegrates. A column of gas, ash, and pulverized rock shoots upward at 100 meters per second, climbing and climbing, spreading at the top like the crown of a pine tree, exactly as Pliny the Younger describes it. Within minutes, the column reaches 20 miles into the stratosphere. It is visible from hundreds of miles away. At Misenum, Pliny's uncle, Pliny the Elder, commander of the Roman fleet and a naturalist obsessed with natural phenomena, immediately orders a boat prepared. He wants a closer look. This curiosity will cost him his life. In Pompeii, 6 miles from the eruption, the reaction is terror. The explosion is deafening. The ground shakes violently. People run into streets, looking up at the mountain they thought they knew. What they see is impossible. Vesuvius splitting open, a black cloud rising higher than clouds have any right to reach, spreading outward, blotting out the sun. Within an hour, the sky darkens. Not evening dark, unnatural dark. Midday becomes midnight as the eruption column spreads overhead. Then the pumice begins to fall. Pumice is volcanic rock full of gas bubbles, light enough to float on water, sharp enough to cut skin. At first, the stones are small, white, the size of beans. They clatter on roof tiles, bounce in streets, sting when they hit exposed skin. Then larger walnuts, eggs, fists. They fall from the black sky in a hail that never stops, accumulating in streets, on roofs, in courtyards. The sound is a constant rattle, stone on stone, tile on tile, impossible to think through, impossible to sleep through. You can hear the individual impacts, at first tap, tap, tap like rain, but within minutes they merge into a roar, a percussion symphony of destruction. Within an hour, the streets are ankle deep. Within 2 hours, knee deep, the pumice keeps falling. This is the critical window. This is when most Pompeians flee. They grab what they can carry, jewelry, coins, maybe a lamp, maybe nothing, and they run. Not toward Vesuvius, obviously. South, southeast, away from the mountain, the roads are chaos. 20,000 people trying to escape through a few gates, carrying children, dragging elderly relatives, pushing carts, herding animals. Some head for the harbour, hoping for boats. The pumice is falling there too, accumulating in the water, making navigation treacherous. Some flee into the countryside, wading through pumice that gets deeper with every hour. Most, we think, escape. The final death toll in Pompeii is perhaps 2,000 out of a population 5 to 10 times that size. Most choose flight. In the forum, a merchant named Lucius Vetutius Placidus. We know his name from painted electoral endorsements that Survive makes a decision. His shop is here. His entire inventory of wine amphorae and oil lamps and brass cooking vessels. Everything he owns, accumulated over 20 years of trading. But the pumice is already up to his knees, still falling, and the sky is black at midday. This is not normal. This is not a storm that will pass. He looks at his merchandise, looks at the sky, looks at his wife and 2 children huddling in the doorway. He chooses. They leave the shop unlocked, take nothing but the coins in his purse, and join the stream of people flooding toward the Herculaneum Gate on the city's northern side, away from Vesuvius. We don't know if Lucius Vetutius Placidus survived. His name disappears from history. His shop was found buried, merchandise intact. Someone made the right choice. Not everyone chooses flight. In the garden of the House of the Golden Bracelet, a wealthy woman, her skeleton shows she was about 45, well-nourished, with the bone density that comes from a life of adequate protein and minimal manual labor, decides to shelter in place. Perhaps she is ill. Perhaps she refuses to leave her home. Perhaps she thinks the thick walls of her villa will protect her. She is wrong. She dies in the garden, along with 12 others her household, maybe, or neighbors who sought shelter with her. Her bracelet, gold, wrought in the form of a 2-headed serpent, weighs 1.3 pounds. It's found on her wrist 2,000 years later. She died wealthy. That didn't save her. In the brothel near the forum, the enslaved workers have no choice. They are locked in their rooms, narrow cells, each barely 6 feet by 7, containing a stone bed and nothing else. No windows. No furniture, just the bed, a thin mattress, and a door that locks from the outside. When the pumice begins to fall, someone unlocks some of the doors. Perhaps a client with a conscience. Perhaps a pimp who realizes his investment is in danger. Perhaps no one, and those doors stayed locked until the building collapsed. We find skeletons in those rooms, people who died in the dark, buried alive by ash and pumice, unable to escape. Their names are scratched on walls in graffiti: Euplia, Maritima, Logas, names that mark them as slaves, probably from the eastern provinces, bought for 600 sesterces and expected to service men for 2 asses per transaction. They die at their workplace, chained to an economy that valued them less than the gold bracelet on the woman's wrist in the garden. Why stay? Many reasons. The enslaved have no choice. They are locked in their quarters, chained to their workstations, unable to flee without keys held by masters who may have already run. In a fullery workshop on the Via dell'Abbondanza, 6 slaves die in the dyeing room, their skeletons found huddled together near vats, still containing purple dye, made from murex shells imported from Phoenicia. Their master, whoever he was, took the keys and left. Or died himself, somewhere else, keys useless in his pocket. Either way, the workers died. The elderly and infirm cannot walk through streets, now buried under a meter of shifting pumice. A woman in her 70s bone analysis shows severe arthritis in her hips and knees, dies in her bedroom, on the 2nd floor of a house near the Stabian Baths. The ground floor is already filled with pumice when she dies. The stairs are impassable. She couldn't have reached the street if she tried, so she doesn't try. She lies on her bed and waits. For what? Rescue that doesn't come? An end she can see approaching? We don't know. The plaster cast shows her lying on her side, knees drawn up, one hand tucked under her cheek. She looks like she's sleeping. She's not. Some choose to protect their property, merchants who won't abandon their goods, homeowners who believe the eruption will end soon, that they can wait it out in the safety of thick walls and sturdy roofs. At the Praedia of Julia Felix, an upscale property that rented rooms to wealthy visitors, the owner or the manager, the ownership structure is unclear, stays to guard the valuables. The property contains expensive furniture, fine bronze sculptures, marble tables, wall paintings by skilled artists. Someone makes the calculation that these are worth the risk. They're wrong. The body is found in the garden, buried under 3 meters of pumice, still wearing gold rings, worth more than a laborer's annual wage. Some may not understand the danger. Pompeians have no concept of a Plinian eruption. They've never seen a volcano. They have no framework for predicting what comes next. Volcanic eruptions aren't part of their cultural memory. The last major eruption of Vesuvius was 1700 years ago, in the Bronze Age, before Pompeii existed. No written records survive. No oral traditions warn that the mountain can kill. It's just a mountain. Mountains don't explode. Except this one does. And by the time Pompeians understand what's happening, escape is already difficult. And some, perhaps, simply make the wrong bet. Every disaster has people who think it won't be as bad as it looks, who believe they'll be the lucky ones, who can't quite process that the world is ending. Human psychology is poorly equipped for unprecedented events. We assume tomorrow will resemble today. We assume problems are temporary. We assume someone will fix this. Someone will help. Someone will arrive with a plan. But no one arrives. The help doesn't come. The mountain doesn't stop. And the people who stayed, for whatever reason, choice or compulsion, wisdom or folly, they shelter in place. They retreat to upper floors as pumice fills the ground level. They tie pillows on their heads to protect against falling stones, as Pliny the Younger describes people doing at Misenum. They wait for the storm to pass, and for hours it doesn't pass. The pumice keeps falling. White pumice, then grey as the magma chamber taps into deeper, older rock. You can see this in the stratigraphy, the layers preserved under the ash. First white, fine-grained, frothy. Then grey, coarser, denser. The change happens around midnight, roughly 12 hours into the eruption. It means the eruption is intensifying, reaching deeper into the magma chamber, drawing up material that's been sitting under pressure for 17 centuries. The volume of material ejected is staggering 4 cubic kilometers of rock, ash, and gas, all thrown into the stratosphere in less than 24 hours. That's enough material to cover Greater London in debris 3 meters deep. It's enough to darken skies across the Mediterranean. Ships at sea 200 miles away report ash falling on their decks. By evening, Pompeii's streets are buried under 2 meters of debris. By midnight, 3 meters. Roofs begin to collapse under the weight. A meter of pumice weighs about half a ton per square meter. 3 meters is crushing. Beams crack, tiles shatter. Buildings that survived the earthquake of 62 AD crumble now under the relentless accumulation. At Misenum, across the bay, Pliny the Younger watches with his mother. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, has sailed across to Stabiae, a town south of Pompeii, trying to rescue a friend named Rectina, whose villa sits at the foot of Vesuvius. But the wind that carries Pliny the Elder toward danger also keeps pumice away from Misenum. The eruption column bends southeast toward Pompeii. At Misenum, they watch the spectacle, the pine tree cloud, the flashes of lightning in the ash column, the way darkness falls in mid-afternoon. Pliny the Younger, 17 or 18 years old, describes reading a book while his mother grows increasingly alarmed. A family friend scolds them for their calm. But Misenum is upwind. The danger there is indirect. At Pompeii, the danger is absolute. The pumice fall continues through the evening, through the night. The darkness is total. No moon, no stars, just black sky raining volcanic rock. Those still alive in Pompeii huddle in whatever shelter remains intact. They cannot dig out, the pumice is too deep, too unstable. They cannot see to navigate streets that no longer exist beneath 3 meters of debris. They are trapped. Some, perhaps, pray to Jupiter, to Venus, to any god who might intercede. The gods are silent. The mountain continues to speak. Around 1 a.m. on October 25, the character of the eruption changes. The Plinian column, which has been climbing steadily into the stratosphere for 12 hours, becomes unstable. The eruption rate exceeds the column's capacity to rise. It begins to collapse. This is the moment when the eruption shifts from merely catastrophic to apocalyptic. As the column falls back on itself, it generates the first pyroclastic surge, a ground-hugging avalanche of superheated gas, ash, and rock fragments. The surge races down Vesuvius's northwest flank toward Herculaneum at speeds approaching 50 miles per hour. Herculaneum, being northwest of Vesuvius, has been largely spared the pumice fall that devastated Pompeii. The wind carried the ash column southeast, but now the surges don't follow wind. They follow gravity, pouring downhill like water, except this water is 500 degrees Celsius. The first surge reaches Herculaneum's outskirts around 1 a.m. It's not as powerful as later surges, but it's lethal. Anyone caught in the open dies instantly, not from fire exactly, but from thermal shock and asphyxiation. Inhaling superheated gas kills in one breath. The surge flows through streets, into buildings, incinerating organic materials. A second surge follows. Herculaneum is smaller than Pompeii, maybe 5,000 people. Most have fled, but hundreds remain, and many have gathered at the waterfront, seeking shelter in arched boathouses, hoping for rescue by sea. The surges find them. The boathouses become ovens. More than 300 skeletons will be discovered there in the 1,980 seconds. Huddled together, flash heated so rapidly, their brains boiled and their skulls exploded from steam pressure. Their bones show the pugilistic pose arms and legs, drawn up as tendons contracted in extreme heat. They died together, families and strangers, pressed against stone walls that offered no protection. At Pompeii, 6 miles southeast, the first 2 surges don't reach the city. They flow northwest. But Pompeians still alive after 12 hours of pumice fall have no way to know this. They crouch in darkness, under 3 meters of debris, feeling the ground shake with each surge, hearing the roar that suggests something worse is coming. And they are right. Something worse is coming. If you enjoy uncovering hidden histories like this, hit subscribe and join us as we explore the moments that changed our world. Dawn arrives, but you wouldn't know it. The sky is still black. The pumice has stopped falling. That's the only indication that the eruption's first phase has ended. At Pompeii, anyone still alive must sense this change. Silence. After 12 hours of constant rattle. Perhaps they think it's over. Perhaps they try to dig themselves out. But the pumice is too deep. Buildings are collapsed. Doors are blocked. And the worst is yet to come. Around 6:30 a.m. on October 25, the eruption column collapses catastrophically. A third pyroclastic surge races down Vesuvius's southern slopes toward Pompeii, much larger than the surges that destroyed Herculaneum. It reaches the city walls but doesn't quite overtop them. This is not mercy. This is delay. The fourth surge, arriving an hour later, around 7:30 a.m., is the killer. This surge is denser, hotter, faster than anything before. Temperature estimates range from 300 to 400 degrees Celsius. It sweeps over the pumice-buried streets at hurricane speed, enveloping everything in superheated ash and gas. Death is instantaneous, not from burning, exactly, but from thermal shock. Blood vaporizes, lungs scald, muscles contract violently in the cadaveric spasm that locks bodies into contorted poses. The surge lasts minutes, maybe less, but it kills everyone who has survived the previous 12 hours. The mother shielding her child dies in this surge, in the Garden of the Fugitives, along with 12 others who sought shelter in the orchard. They are not burned to skeletons. They die clothed, intact, their bodies sealed in ash that hardens around them. Elsewhere, a man dies clutching money. A couple dies embracing. 13 people die in one room. A gladiator dies in his cell, along with a woman wearing expensive jewelry, possibly a wealthy spectator who came to see him, trapped when the barracks collapsed. A dog dies on its chain, unable to reach high enough ground. A baker's loaves remain in the oven, carbonized but recognizable. The brothel workers die at their stations, some still shackled. The slaves die in their quarters. The wealthy die in their villas. The surge doesn't discriminate. Fifth and sixth surges follow, adding layers of ash and debris. By mid-morning, on October 25, Pompeii is buried under 6 meters of volcanic deposits, 3 meters of pumice from the full phase, another 3 meters of pyroclastic surge materials. The city has vanished. Where streets and buildings stood, there is now a grey wasteland, still steaming, dotted with the tops of taller structures that protrude above the new surface like broken teeth. At Misenum, Pliny the Younger and his mother experience their own terror as ash falls and the ground shakes, though they survive, but Pliny the Elder does not. The 55-year-old commander reached Stabiae by boat, but couldn't leave the wind and waves prevented departure. He spent the evening reassuring his terrified friends, bathing, dining, sleeping. Then, on the morning of October 25, as surges swept the region, he went down to the beach to observe the sea. There, overcome by sulphurous fumes, he was a heavy man with likely respiratory issues. He collapsed. His slaves tried to help him rise, but he died. His body was recovered 3 days later, intact and peaceful, looking more asleep than dead. His nephew's letters to the historian Tacitus, written a quarter century later, are our only eyewitness account. They are vivid, detailed, invaluable. They are also limited. Pliny the Younger never mentions Pompeii. He describes Misenum, Stabiae, the cloud, the ash, the fear. But he doesn't tell us what happened at Pompeii because he doesn't know. Nobody who stayed in Pompeii survived to tell the story. The eruption doesn't end cleanly. Small explosions, ash falls, and earthquakes continue for days, maybe weeks. But the catastrophic phase, the Plinian column, the surges, is over in less than 24 hours. When the sky clears, the landscape is transformed. Pompeii is gone. Herculaneum is buried under 20 meters of pyroclastic flow deposits that hardened into rock. Stabiae is damaged. Oplontis, another town, is destroyed. The coastline has changed. The Sarno River has been diverted. The region is a wasteland of ash, pumice, and mud. Survivors return to dig for valuables, tunneling through the ash, salvaging what they can. Evidence of these tunnels has been found by archaeologists, but systematic excavation is impossible. There's simply too much debris. So the cities are abandoned. Nature reclaims them. Grass grows, trees take root. Within a generation, Pompeii is a memory. Within a century, it is forgotten. The location is known only vaguely, stories of buried cities in the hills near Vesuvius, but no precise markers. For 1700 years, Pompeii lies silent under its shroud of ash. Then, in 1748, during excavations of Herculaneum begun decades earlier, Spanish engineer Roque Joaquín de Alcubierre begins digging at a site called Civita. What he finds astonishes the world. Pompeii, substantially intact, its buildings preserved by the very disaster that destroyed them. Unlike cities that survive into the modern era, growing and changing and erasing their ancient layers, Pompeii stopped in 79 AD. What the ash buried, the ash preserved. Frescoes retain their colours, mosaics remain in place. Graffiti is legible. Furniture, though carbonized, holds its shape. Food is recognizable: bread, figs, eggs, fish. Skeletons lie where they fell, and there are the voids, peculiar cavities in the hardened ash, shaped like human bodies. In 1863, Giuseppe Fiorelli, appointed director of excavations, realizes what these voids are. When the bodies decomposed, they left perfect hollow spaces in the ash that had encased them. Fiorelli pours liquid plaster into these voids. When the plaster hardens and the surrounding ash is removed, what emerges is a three-dimensional record of the victim at the moment of death. The technique is brilliant. The results are haunting. The first casts are made in the Garden of the Fugitives. 13 people, adults and children, sprawled across the orchard. You can see details: the folds of clothing, the expressions on faces, the positions of hands. A man rises on his elbows, trying to lift himself. A woman lies face down, one arm extended. The baby in the merchant family cast is the youngest victim found at Pompeii, 12 to 14 months old, based on dental evidence. Her tiny form is perfect, preserved in plaster, frozen in death. Over the following decades, more casts are made, about 104 in total, though some were destroyed in Allied bombing during World War II. The casts transform archaeology into something intensely personal. These are not anonymous skeletons. They are individuals, named or not, whose final moments are visible. The dog twisting against its chain, the couple embracing, the person with their hands over their face, trying to shield against the ash. They make Pompeii's tragedy unbearably real. Modern science has added new dimensions to understanding. CT scans of the casts reveal bones inside the plaster, allowing age, sex, and health status to be determined. DNA analysis, published in 2024, has challenged assumptions about relationships. The mother and child in the Golden Bracelet House are not mother and child at all, but an adult male and a child genetically unrelated. The sisters are not sisters. The casts show us what people wanted to believe about these deaths: families dying together, mothers protecting children. But genetics shows reality is messier. People died with whoever was nearby when the surge hit. They are connected not by blood but by shared catastrophe. The studies also confirm how they died. Analysis of bones from the Portanola victims shows chemical signatures consistent with exposure to temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Celsius. They didn't suffocate slowly. They were flash-cooked, death arriving in a fraction of a second as superheated gas stopped their hearts and boiled their tissues. This is both horrifying and, in a terrible way, merciful. They had no time to suffer. Why does Pompeii matter? Not just because of the deaths, though 2,000 deaths are 2,000 tragedies. Pompeii matters because of what the ash preserved. Most ancient cities are known through texts which are biased toward the literate elite, or through monumental architecture which reflects state power. Pompeii gives us something different daily life, frozen midstream. The graffiti on walls isn't commissioned propaganda. It's casual scrawl election slogans, insults, love notes, price lists, gladiator standings. Celadus, the Thracian, makes the girls sigh. Epaphra is not a good ball player. Marcus loves Spendusa. I screwed the barmaid. Successus, the weaver, loves Iris, the barmaid. Innkeeper's slave girl. These voices speak directly across time, unfiltered. The brothel graffiti is particularly revealing, not just erotic images, but records of transactions, boasts from clients, nicknames of workers. Here I had a good screw. Felix was here and had a good time, Athenais, for 2 asses. These aren't the lives of senators and emperors. These are ordinary people, workers, merchants, slaves, the invisible majority who built Rome but left few records. The houses reveal social stratification. The wealthy live in atrium-style villas with central courtyards, elaborate frescoes, private baths, and gardens. The poor live in small apartments above shops, in rooms barely large enough for a bed. Slaves sleep in cells without windows, often locked at night. The bakeries show the technology of bread production, large millstones turned by donkeys, ovens capable of baking hundreds of loaves. The fulleries show how cloth was processed, trampled in vats of urine and natron to clean it, stretched on frames to dry. The thermopolia, fast food counters, show what people ate: jars set into marble counters, held stews, beans, lentils, wine. This is archaeology at its most granular, not kings and battles, but ovens and urinals. Not poetry, but graffiti. Not myth, but lunch. Pompeii shows us Rome not as the marble ideal, but as the lived reality, with all its hierarchies, brutalities, pleasures, and mundane necessities. It also shows us the vulnerability of civilization. Pompeii, in 79 AD, is a success story, a prosperous city, well-governed, integrated into an empire that brings roads, aqueducts, legal systems, and trade networks. It has survived wars, political upheavals, and an earthquake that destroyed half the city. It is rebuilding, optimistic about the future. Then, in 24 hours, it's gone. Not because of human failure, but because of geological indifference. The mountain doesn't care about prosperity or empire. The mountain obeys the laws of thermodynamics and fluid dynamics. When pressure exceeds rock strength, the rock breaks. When magma reaches the surface, it erupts. There is no moral dimension to this. There is no message about hubris or divine punishment, despite what some ancient writers suggested. It is simply nature operating according to nature's rules. And those rules are incompatible with human life. Vesuvius has erupted many times since 79 AD, when an eruption destroyed 3 villages and killed 26 people. Each eruption reminds us that Vesuvius is not dormant, it is merely resting. Currently, 3 million people live in the Naples metropolitan area, well within range of a potential eruption. 600,000 live in the red zone of highest risk. Plans exist for evacuation, but evacuating 600,000 people is a logistical nightmare. Modern surveillance watches the mountain constantly. Seismographs, GPS monitors, gas sensors, satellite imaging. We would have warning, days, maybe weeks. But we would also have panic, gridlock, and the question of where 3 million people go when their home is no longer safe. Pompeii is not ancient history. It is future possibility. The lesson of Pompeii, if there is one, is not that we are doomed, it is that we are fragile. That the order we build cities, laws, markets, families, exists on sufferance, from forces that predate us and will outlast us. That disaster is not a moral failing, but a natural occurrence. That when the mountain speaks, the wise listen. But listening is not the same as understanding, and understanding is not the same as being able to prevent. The Pompeians could not prevent their mountain from erupting. They lacked the tools, the knowledge, the framework. We have better tools now. We understand plate tectonics, magma chambers, eruption precursors, but understanding doesn't grant control. If Vesuvius erupts at the scale of 79 AD, and it could, geologically speaking, there's no reason it couldn't, then all the monitoring and modeling in the world won't protect the people who cannot or will not leave. The mountain doesn't negotiate. The mountain doesn't care. Walking through Pompeii today, you see the casts. They're displayed in various locations: the Garden of the Fugitives, the Antiquarian Museum, individual homes. They are simultaneously ancient and modern, historical and immediate. The plaster preserves details that skeletons alone could never show: the texture of cloth, the leather of a sandal, the shape of a beard, the contours of a face. They are not peaceful. They are contorted, twisted, arms raised, mouths open. These are not poses people choose. These are the poses death imposes when it arrives too fast for the body to accept. Yet there is something tender about them too. The way the woman curves over her child, the way the couple holds each other, the way a person's hand reaches out toward what we cannot know, toward help, toward family, toward gods who did not answer. These gestures, frozen in plaster, speak a language that transcends time and culture. They speak of love and fear and the desperate hope that someone might save us even when we know, logically, that we cannot be saved.